Alrighty. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about identity, as I believe that identity is at the core of some of the most interesting and fundamental questions that are coming out of the rise of the metaverse, cyberspace, Web3, the Matrix, whatever it is that you call that online space where you hang out with your friends. The consortium has proposed that DIDs, or decentralized identifiers, are a suitable solution for how to deal with identity online. This is important because a foundation of any economy is a verifiable identity, a method of value exchange, and a record of that value exchange. And a record of that value exchange. This consortium has been pushing a W3C standard, even though there have been multiple proofs of technical difficulties and technical exploits of the DID system. They claim that they are providing self-sovereign identity, but instead they're just delivering another round of the same old, same old. Large corporations holding user data and being put in the place to eventually exploit that user data. It's truly the opposite of what self-sovereign means. On top of my normal nightmare about passwords and keeping control of my identity system, I now have to keep control and access to all of these DIDs across all of these other locations in order to demonstrate my identity in any meaningful way. This consortium is pushing the idea that you are the center of your digital world, and that is exactly what we should be striving for. User-centric, user-owned, user-controlled identity. That should be the next generation. But unfortunately, that is far from what their implementation has achieved. Back to the technical exploits. My favorite article that I've read recently is in IEEE Access, and it's by Kim, Cho, Kim, and Wu. And it's exceptionally thorough in breaking apart all of the different attack vectors for DIDs. It's incredibly thorough. And what it shows off is DIDs truly do have the best of all attack vectors. Wallet attacks, phishing attacks, cache poisoning attacks, they're all there. It's a cornucopia of attack vectors. They go through and map out the entire ecosystem and point to every point there is a flaw. Like I said, it's extremely thorough. However, they did leave out some of the systemic fragilities of this system. One of the most critical components of the entire DID system is the universal resolver, which acts as the definitive cross-issuer index. As an example of one of these fragilities, what happens when the universal resolver is offline for an extended period of time, like since May 13th, when the last time it was indexed by Internet Archive? What happens? Well, the bank that's trying to verify the DID of my pay stub at ADP doesn't get that information. Studio 54, when they're trying to age verify me to let me in, they also don't get that information. Without this critical component of the ecosystem being up and available, the whole ecosystem goes down. Another systemic fragility is how they choose issuers, hosts, and validators. They've held up multiple times DNS issuers and certificate authorities as suitable types of individuals or organizations that can act as issuers or hosts or validators. But there's a deep record of these self-same organizations being compromised, and those compromises affecting individuals. And while I love technical exploits and systemic fragility as much as everyone else, I think the real unconsidered flaw inside of the DID system is the requirements to exist in the real world. Things like regulatory compliance. Design decisions made by the DID consortium make it incompatible with the idea of verifying a human identity. What is identity? It's the collection of individual items that make me me and you you, right? It's my face, my retina print, my fingerprints, my footprint, my signature, my voice, my hair color. Those things that make it easy for people to identify me. But is identity the same as identification? No, it's not. Identity is in no way the same as identification. Identification is a physical artifact given to you by your government. They provide it to you so that they can authenticate you in the real world at their pleasure. That's why it's given to you. It's provided to enable on-the-point authentication. Who are you? Oh yeah, according to whom? Who is the oracle for that data? Who was the one that actually attested to that information? Well, in this case, it's the state's Department of Motor Vehicles acting as the oracle, having seen the foundational underlying documents and recorded those attestations about you into their system. That identification also carries with it authorization. I can drive a car, I can catch a fish, I can leave the country, and I can take advantage of warehouse pricing because of the identification that I carry. Identification is also notoriously easy to both copy, fake, and impersonate and modify. So DIDs are attestations which are tied to an identification, not to an identity. This is a structural, fundamental flaw in the system. At the very heart of verifiable identity is the ability for you to get to the unique human that owns that identity. A piece of identification does not do that. And what about the 22 million people inside of the United States that have no government ID, or the billion worldwide that don't either? They're locked out of this system because they can't make an attestation that works for DIDs. There's no consideration for either deduplication or for the unidentified. If I have my driver's license and ISP bill, I have one account. Passport and water bill, a second. I have a state ID and a PG&E bill. Guess what? That's a third account. Without being able to prevent individuals from creating multiple system-wide accounts, this system will be exploited. Put simply, with an identification system built on DIDs, I can launder money. Laundering money is explicitly the thing that financial regulation is built to address. Fun fact, DID also means dissociative identity disorder. Sybil was a dissociative identity disorder individual. Just like Moon Knight, who has 3 personalities, he gets to have 9 DIDs if he has 3 identification cards. Within the DID system, organizations have many important roles. They're the issuer, the validator, and the host of your data. There's no consideration for a business to be a component of this system. Even though corporations have the same action potential as individuals. They're not a component of this system. I can't show up with my business license and get a DID. So business entity cloning, impersonation, and hijacking are all possibilities in this system. And without a mechanism to deduplicate individuals, the repercussions cascade as businesses enter the mix. Can you imagine the chaos if someone created a structurally identical international monetary fund? Can you imagine? But what relies on personal and corporate identity? Well, financial regulations do. Privacy regulations do. International and domestic financial regulation is written to address individuals and corporations, entities which DIDs do not deduplicate nor definitively address. Tax code, financial regulation, and all laws are targeted at individuals, at identities, not claims. Because of these two facts, there's no capacity in the DID architecture for many types of custody which are important in the real world. But what are DIDs exactly? The identity solution based on DIDs being proposed has the organization who has data about you publishing claims or DID documents that they then host on their computers pointed to by DIDs or referential URLs. The issuer of the DID is the custodian of your identity data, and it is their responsibility to maintain it with confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Your dry cleaner is transferring custody of your clothes to you when they collect the ticket and hand you back your shrink-wrapped clothes. But what if the institution's servers are offline, or the database hasn't replicated from other locations, or the communications links are down? Well, in order to use that attestation, you have to rely on the custodian being available, online, and up to date. That's the equivalent of only being able to use your driver's license for age validation while the DMV is physically open. That doesn't make any sense. The DID proposal fails to accomplish identity verification and, by extension, authentication. But if they didn't solve for identity verification, what do the proponents of DIDs say they did solve? Well, passwordless login, transaction signing, persistent communications channels. Well, you know what, guys? I can do all of that with my private public key pair and Ethereum wallet. I don't need DIDs to do any of the things that they're claiming on that slide. The three pillars of an economy are verifiable identity, a method of value exchange, and a record of those value exchanges. In a digital economy, most means of value exchange are reliant on the underlying banking system custodying your funds and vouching for the custody of those funds. In the decentralized internet, where DeFi exists, you're relying on the various platforms to custody your funds. Now we're creating a whole new class of identity custodian, something that never existed before. Now these individual organizations have to conform to the varying regulations around data privacy, document retention, online availability, and security. Many of these organizations that are held out to be a member of the DID architecture are not well equipped in order to take on this additional IT overhead. Schools, healthcare institutions, and even government is generally not interested in an unending support infrastructure like this. the DID construct, inside of the DID construct, if the custodian is not able to deduplicate people, whose claim is valid? Is it my identity with my driver's license or my identity with my passport? And if they can't deduplicate people nor companies, then authentication and authorization are nearly impossible. And the whole economy is based on quicksand. Remember, financial custodianship is a licensed, regulated activity worldwide and requires compliance with all of the financial services legislation. What about identity custodianship? Have you ever even seen a law that deals with identity custodianship? I haven't. The need for this digital identity system is only going to become more important as I'm able to project myself as my avatar into Web3. As the technology improves and our avatars become photorealistic, who's allowed to make an avatar of Brad Witteman? Who's allowed to wear that avatar? What authentication and authorization will that carry with it? More importantly, how do we prevent deep fakes from creating accounts online now? And what will be the method of recovery when we find them? We have to plan for these things before they occur because they will occur. Unfortunately, DIDs and this whole architecture is not a solution for verifiable identity, especially if you want to solve for the real-world financial, regulatory, and economic considerations today. So some of these problems might be able to be addressed, but in light of the many technical exploits that have already been documented so thoroughly, and the structural fragilities that we've discussed, maybe we should reset. Start fresh, taking these identity-related needs and regulations into consideration when designing this foundational element of the next generation internet. Start again with the benefit of all the knowledge that we have now. While many technical exploits exist in the DID space, I believe it will be the non-technical structural issues of identity, regulation, and compliance that truly are the undoing of the DID framework as a candidate identity solution for Web3 and beyond. Everyone remember Katz from the beginning? He's very happy to custody all of your DIDs for you. Thank you very much, everyone. Question?
Spoof it. Yeah, I was just saying that people were able to spoof the actual recovery checks because they would do a video check to make sure it's the person. All somebody has to do is use the 3D printer and print a mask that makes themselves look like the person.
Indeed, and indeed, that's a very good point. And the ability for deep fakes to wrap a video of an individual around a 3D form is readily available today. There have been some incredible deep fakes done by amateurs. If you are familiar with the TV show The Mandalorian, the actual version that was broadcast was actually done by not the pros at ILM, but by an amateur who showed up and said, your version that you broadcast looked horrible, this one's much better. So there's amateurs out there that are absolutely better than all of the professionals at making deep fakes.
Wow.
And that should scare everyone.
Yeah, I know the Lucas guys, they are open to like letting people do DIY. I didn't realize they broadcasted actual fan film.
Oh yeah.
sorry?
No, that's a great question. So, yes, the question was, how did I get into identification? Is that's not something that is generally thought of in tech circles. Was that the question? Perfect. I started life as an economist, okay, which is very strange. When I was growing up, there's the kid that wants to be the fireman, there was the kid that wants to be the policeman. I wanted to be an economist. So I read economics books. And everything to me when I was growing up looked like systems. And I got really into that, and I went to school, and I went to school to become an economist, and I got out and I got a job at a think tank in Washington, D.C., because that's what you do as an economist, and I hated it. But what it did teach me was the importance of the individual and individual regulation within the marketplace. And then I went on to a career building out in mobile telephony architectures, various elements of the mobile telephony system. So SMS to MIME email and back, that was my first startup. So everything inside of a mobile telephony network is an economy. It's an individual represented by their SIM card, a call data record, which is the method of value exchange, and the billing platform, which is the record of the value exchange. So if you think of every network that you can think of, they're all economies. And when you think of things that way, it gets very, very interesting watching the meetings of the different economies. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
And thank you. Next up, we have Mr. Bob